We're live. Hey, y'all. This is the first time I didn't have any technical difficulties with LinkedIn not working. Hey, happy Friday. We have live streamed every day this week. We have built a content marketing strategy essentially from scratch. And today we are going to start planning content. So I think this is generally the most fun part, right? I think people love to get into the part where you get to just sort of come up with ideas, brainstorm and that kind of thing. We did a little bit of that yesterday around different uh, types of tactics. Today we can get even more granular and even talk about specific themes or specific content ideas. The actual execution of some of these concepts and ideas that we developed over this week. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has joined, followed along this whole week, joined the live streams, checked things out, sent comments, shared the posts on LinkedIn. So many great responses. I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. And I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been insightful and valuable for you all to watch me work through the process, share my thinking, my approach, and sort of how we approach content marketing at Optimist. As always, I'm an open book. So if you have questions or you want to learn more about our process or how we do things or how I approach things, at any point feel free to ping me. Drop a comment here in the chat on the live stream. Message me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me on Tofu. Whatever makes sense. I'm here. I'm accessible and happy to help however I can. All right, y'all. Let us get into it for the day. Real quick, let me do my kind of quick housekeeping things. I got to post on LinkedIn. I'm actually going to take a quick second here and follow up. I know I owe some people some templates on LinkedIn as well. So I'd like to get those out of the way. Let me see. Where is my post? So last day. Okay, hang on just a second. Let me format these really quick. I gotta just get these. Doing certain process. All right. So while I am pulling this together, let me get my screen share going and let's open up our canvas so we can start that process. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'll try to talk through this while I'm posting my my LinkedIn post here. Okay, so yesterday we kind of rounded out our strategy, right? So we started with really figuring out at each stage in the funnel and for each kind of function within the marketing org, what the goals might be, what the problems that we're trying to solve look like, and then an overarching kind of strategy for how we want to solve that. And then yesterday, what we did is we sort of translated that into actions or tactics. So we took all of the things that we had previously mapped out, and we kind of said, okay, how can we actually approach this? How can we actually create content that aligns with this strategy to help us achieve this specific goal? And so that's what you'll see here in the tactics, right? We talked about a bunch of different stuff. We generally focused on kind of thematic ideas, right? So, in general, what kind of content might we create or publish or post? And so today, what we'll do is sort of take that two main goals for today. One is to just kind of recap on that. So go through, kind of talk through what we decided yesterday, see if we come up with any other ideas. As I mentioned yesterday, first of all, there are no bad ideas necessarily in the brainstorming stage, but that doesn't necessarily mean you come up with the best ideas either, right? So, I think it's very much an iterative process, and I think the key there is kind of revisiting it with a fresh mind, looking at it again, saying, hey, does this still make sense? Is there a different way I might approach this, or a different tactic that I think might work better? So we'll do that today. And we'll also kind of work through the process of kind of mapping this into some kind of an actual content plan. I don't think we'll have an ultra specific day by day content schedule or anything today, Gonna kind of take it a little easier today. We don't have like a defined stopping point, so we'll just kind of work through it together. Start to translate things into ideas, and we'll sort of see how far we get, and then we'll probably uh, leave it there. So let me. Sorry, I'm still in the process here of uh, dropping comments on all these posts on LinkedIn. By the way, if I do owe you a template on LinkedIn or anything like that, please let me know. I know I've probably missed some folks who have left comments, so apologies for that. I promise I haven't been trying to exclude you. uh, I've just been trying my best to keep up, but there's a lot of comments and messages, so I know I haven't done a great job. All right, let me pull this up. Just a couple more comments here, and then we'll be ready to get underway. Sorry about that. Where the heck? Okay, here we go. Finally found my original post. That took way too long. All right. Sorry for the delay. Okay, let us get into it. Okay, so what I'm going to do today, I think, is I'm going to open up two sheets. We'll do kind of like a side by side process here. So we'll kind of work through the sheet that you're looking at right now, our strategies and tactics, and then we will have sort of a separate sheet for content planning. I like to do kind of side by side thing that usually is helpful for me. Let me grab my columns here from one of our content calendar sheets. We're not going to need all of these, but we'll just name this really quick. I should have put this in my folder, but I didn't. All right, so let me set this up here. I'm going to do a split view, and then I just need to reset my screen share so you can see both of them. All right. Here we go. Okay, so you should be able to see both of these screens here. So yeah, let me just hide some of this stuff that we're not going to need today. So we might have like a working title, kind of playbook. Yeah, this isn't a great mapping for this, but we'll just keep this for now. We can just make it work for us. Okay, so the idea being, we want to start to translate some of these tactics over here into some specific or potentially specific content plans. Uh, let's revisit this. So the first place we started yesterday was we talked about the affinity content. So basically just trying to grow our audience, get people to know and like us. Our goal for the brand function is to increase our collective social reach. So we talked about there's a lot of ways that we could increase our brand exposure, as it were, and kind of create brand awareness. But one of the things that we talked about was, hey, there's really this huge opportunity that we have that's unique to Optimist, which is that we have a big network of folks who we work with on ongoing client work or have worked with in the past. And so how can we kind of tap into that community and get those people to help us kind of grow our reach? And so one of the couple things that we talked about, things like a team member spotlight series, a collective team acknowledgement content, right? So the idea there being that we would have like, rather than just saying like, here's Katie, she's great, here's what she does, we would say, here's some work that we did as a team. Here are all the awesome people who sort of worked on it. Obviously, we have to get some kind of buy-in there from the client, depending on the context of that. We talked about doing some kind of like an award or like a specific acknowledgement. So, Optimist of the Week or something, endorsement of Optimist strengths from members of the Optimist network. So this was kind of an idea to kind of flip it on its head. So could we, rather than us endorsing our team members, could we, for instance, create some kind of content about, some kind of content about our about us as a business, and then sort of have our team members weigh in on how great it is to work with us, or how we've mastered these certain parts of content marketing that other teams haven't quite figured out, or whatever it is, right? We talked about doing a pipeline. By the way, shout out to I think that was Chris, maybe, who came up with this idea yesterday in the brainstorm. So thanks for sharing that idea. This idea of doing kind of a pipeline timeline. So sort of acknowledging the different people who contributed to let's say kicking off work with a specific new client or something. We talked about doing like a public endorsement of team members that we like, and then like a publicly curated list of endorsed freelancers. So this is actually the idea that I liked the best from yesterday. I don't know if you guys remember this. So first of all, we talked about two different channels here, so LinkedIn and communities. This came when we were talking specifically about communities, and I think it could potentially apply to both, but certainly works for communities. So the idea being here that we would like sort of, we would build kind of our own Rolodex, right? So our team is 100% freelancers. Those freelancers are, generally often looking for and taking on work outside of Optimist. And so, could we sort of leverage our platform to sort of elevate their presence in communities and possibly on LinkedIn by saying like, hey, here are the folks that we know, folks that we work with, and the folks that we sort of publicly endorse as like great freelancers. So if you're not going to work with Optimist as an agency and you're looking for great freelancers, here's some people you may want to hire. I really like that idea. I'm going to pop that over here. I think that's a good one. I hate these columns right now. This is our normal like working calendar, or like our content calendar format for clients. But in this case, we need to have kind of special needs based on our own strategy. So we'll want to probably adapt this slightly. So I'm just gonna put in like concept maybe, and then of course I pulled my formatting in here. So now I got to fix my formatting. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Wait, where did my? Oh, I got this open. Okay, so we've got a concept. We got a content idea. So yeah, I mean, I think the content idea here is pretty straightforward, right? And then let's call it like let's do like a cadence maybe. So what we've got here is publicly endorsed content. So the kind of idea is sort of like a roundup of like freelancers to hire, kind of thing, right? Or like Optimist approved. And of course, that would include the folks on our team, etc. Cadence, we can talk about the different channels, right? So we've got, we definitely know this is like a community thing. This is probably like once a month, maybe. Like, this probably is not going to be something that we're going to do every day. It's probably not going to change that frequently, right? We've got kind of our core network of freelancers that we know and trust, that we like. But we could update it fairly periodically. It might not even be monthly. Honestly, it might be like a quarterly thing. That gives us enough time, where there may be some changes, right? We may be working with some new freelancers. We may sort of evaluate some new folks. I think we definitely want to keep this like 100% positive, right? It's definitely not like a list of people we don't like or people that we didn't add to the list. It's just people like, hey, we worked with these people. We like their work. They do good stuff. Here's who we think you should look for if you're trying to hire somebody as a freelancer. The other thing I definitely like is this. I mean, a team member spotlight is good also. I think that's, sort of a good kind of fallback option, really easy to execute. Obviously anytime we can acknowledge our team and their work and that kind of thing makes them feel good. But I think we could honestly get a little bit more mileage both for us and also for our team, right? Because I think that's the other thing that we want to keep in mind here is that, we're not trying to be entirely self-serving. Obviously, we have our own business goals, but a big part of this is that we want to be sort of paying it forward in a way to the folks that we're acknowledging here. Both because they're members of our team and we appreciate their work, but also because that's kind of part of the strategy, right? Is to sort of transfer some of that social proof and trust from our side, and leverage that to hopefully get some sort of trade in for brand exposure for our benefit, if you will. So collective team acknowledgement, content, right? So the team behind content X. So how would we actually execute that? I mean, I think pretty straightforward, right? So it'd be like we'd have to, again, we have to get approval from the client to sort of disclose some of the details here. But I mean, like project uh, review. And it almost works as kind of like a mini case study too, because like, a big part of the work that we do is not just the content itself. It's not even it's not even the outcome or like the KPIs associated with that content. A lot of the work that we do is like the inputs and the thinking and the strategy that goes into it. Why do we do it this way? Why do we approach it like this? What other options did we consider? That type of, kind of, that kind of thinking. That's of course where we'll have to get a little bit careful with the from the client side. They won't want to divulge all the secret sauce behind the scenes necessarily. But hopefully we can get kind of buy-in for kind of a mutually beneficial like promotion there. The nice thing about this approach too is that we get to kind of tap in the team on this, but we also get to acknowledge our clients and our stakeholders and points of contact there. So there's sort of a double kind of social proof opportunity on this kind of content. I mean, I think this would be great. I think this is probably another like a quarterly thing. I mean, I'd love to just do it monthly, but I think the amount of time it will take to kind of produce something like this at a high level and really get, make it valuable as a piece of content uh, will be a lot. The other thing is that I think, the other thing that I think is that it will be, it'd be not every project is going to be sort of worth its own, review or sort of case study, if you will, right? So I don't want to try to force a cadence there that is forces us to kind of skimp on the quality or sort of sacrifice the quality in order to keep up with the output. So I think doing that something like a quarterly that gives us plenty of time to like find like, hey, what was actually like the most fun or exciting or standout project or piece of content that we worked on this month, or I'm sorry, this quarter, and then highlight that rather than having to pick something every month where hey, maybe there wasn't really anything super exceptional. We were just kind of doing meat and potatoes kind of content this month, which is valuable, but maybe doesn't necessarily make for a super compelling piece of case study content. I think the channel here is probably pretty straightforward. This is almost certainly a LinkedIn thing. We could probably cross pollinate these a little bit. Community. Yeah, I mean, we could certainly, for instance, like this, we could definitely announce this, for instance, on LinkedIn. And we could certainly, cross post this, I guess, in like a community. I don't know if, I guess, this could work as community, sort of native community content. Again, keeping in mind that our content is sort of, when we think about community, it's a pretty broad category, but basically, we're thinking about Slack communities like Tofu, Superpath, etc. Also thinking potentially about like Reddit subreddits, etc. So yeah, if we could kind of format this kind of content as like a native LinkedIn kind of thing, that would work there. This community is pretty much only going to be for Slack. Like this isn't gonna this content I don't think works for something like Reddit. Doesn't really make sense in off the top of my head. Yeah, so I feel good about that. I mean, I think that's like a good, we've got sort of the bones here of a couple content pieces that are going to be kind of like tent poles of our affinity strategy. Let me check in the chat real quick to see who's with us. Anybody collect the case studies as a built-in process? Yeah, thanks, Robert. Thanks for your input. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I think something like that could definitely be good. Let us, yeah. So what do we got next here? So next up, we're thinking about demand gen. So again, keep in mind kind of like our North Star goal here is that we're trying to get people not just to like engage with our brand, but to actually get to our website, like look at our homepage. That's really it. Like we're not looking for them to read content or give us an email address or anything like that. Like we're just trying to like basically drive more traffic to our homepage. The thinking there, the logic being that the sort of awareness function of demand gen basically includes two things. One is people know who we are; they are aware of our brand, they know what Optimist is, and hopefully recognize our logo, that kind of thing. But the second piece of it is also that they are like aware of what we do, and they have like a general sort of they have a place in their mind where they sort of put us, and so that's sort of what we're trying to achieve here. And I think the goal of getting people to the homepage sort of reinforces both those, right? If you come to our website, you've seen our website, then you'll have a little bit of like recognition of our logo and our word mark and that kind of stuff. But if you look at our homepage and you read that messaging, then you'll have sort of one level deeper understanding of like, oh, this is what they do, these are the types of clients they work with, etc. So that's kind of what we're trying to do there. The content types that we came up with yesterday, or the specific tactics we talked about doing, the Optimist business growth journey content. This is something that I've been doing, at least once a year, every year for since we started. So for 8 years now. I mean, I think that's almost certainly going to continue. Right now we do it. I generally do it yearly. I've had a couple of years where I did multiples. I did for a while. I was doing like a quarterly update, kind of thing. I think that was interesting, but I think it doesn't give you much time to kind of reflect on some of the things that you've learned and kind of zoom out and look at the big picture, which I think is where a lot of the really valuable insights come from as like an entrepreneur. Is that if you're writing about the thing that's happening to you today, you don't really have much hindsight or insight about how that kind of played out or fit into the big picture. And so you're just sort of journaling, as it were, rather than sort of reflecting, in my experience. So I think, a yearly cadence for stuff like this still feels pretty good. Maybe we could do like a 6-month update kind of thing, but I think overall a yearly one is pretty good. This is LinkedIn community, are kind of the two main channels here. Again, we talked about doing an ops evolution content, so kind of focusing behind the scenes on Optimist. We also talked about doing like a content and marketing report. So like here's how our own content and our own marketing is working. So kind of a follow on to this series, basically. Hey, we sort of built this strategy in public. Now, like, how's it going? Kind of thing. I like both these ideas. I wonder, I feel like this could kind of be. Dang it! I gotta start pasting without formatting. Okay, so I think this is actually could kind of be, we can kind of combine those into one concept with two different execution, right? Which is like, Optimist behind the scenes. So, basically, let's say we've got I don't know, a quarterly or a monthly report where we kind of put out some updates. Now, this is a little different, I think, from like this business growth journey. It's not focused on like the big picture, like here's how much revenue we had and here's what our profit was and that kind of thing. It's more like, how did our marketing perform this quarter, or how did we, what problems did we run into with content operations this quarter, and then how do we solve them? So a little bit more tactical and a little less kind of big picturey, which I think means that we can do it a little bit more frequently, potentially. Case studies, I think, is obvious. We got to have case studies, right? I don't know if we have any additional like sort of details or thoughts on like how we execute that. Right now we have sort of two types of case studies that we do, and to be completely transparent, we're not, like many agencies, we're not great at capturing those and sort of publishing them regularly. But for the most part, most of our case studies are high level. Here's this client, they approached us, here's what the outcome looked like, just kind of sheer like top line numbers. I think that's valuable. I'd love to do more of the other kind of case study that we've done a few times in the past, which is like a long form. Obviously that takes a lot more effort. And so it's and it also tends, it takes a lot more buy-in from the client also to kind of delve into the specifics of like how we did this, and how we approached it. I wonder if there's a new format there. something in between those two options that would be a better fit. Um, this kind of fits into that, right? So like the collective team acknowledgement, I think kind of fits into that. It's sort of like a mini case study. I think that something like that could work. Um, the other thing to think about here is part of our like sort of positioning change is that we are a little less focused on just sort of like top line business outcomes. And what I mean by that is that historically clients have hired us, and basically said, "Hey, go like scale our organic traffic and our leads or signups or revenue from organic. That's your job. Like just figure out how to do that." Um, and so because of that, all of our case studies have been focused on those like top line metrics, like how much did we scale the traffic, how much did we scale leads, how much did we scale revenue, whatever it was, right? Um, Obviously those numbers are still good, but I think in sort of this new kind of updated positioning and business strategy where we're a little bit more integrated into an existing team, it's going to be a lot harder for us to capture those kind of outcomes. In part because like we're not the only drivers, right? So if we're working with your content team, your team's creating content, we're creating content, and we're also, by the way, part of a much larger marketing org, then yeah, it would be weird for us to be like, oh yeah, yeah we drove 200% growth in revenue, unless we can directly attribute it to a specific work that we did, which again, not super likely. So, what does a case study look like if our job is basically to just sort of support content marketing by kind of handling the execution piece of it, that kind of thing. I guess the outcomes there are more operational, right? So it's like, hey, we increased our output, or we, increased content quality, or we, supported this many campaigns, that kind of thing. Yeah, that could be interesting. That could be an interesting case study. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna jot that down here, right? So like content ops outcomes case studies, right? So just like a kind of a different flavor of a case study there. The other thing that I'm super interested in doing is like a like doing so the idea that I had here was actually I called it like a content X-ray. So what I'd love to do, for instance, is to like take a piece of content that we've created and have like a way for people to sort of see all of the thinking, the strategy, the writing, the editing, the revisions, the design, like all of the nuts and bolts that happen like behind the scenes. Because I think that's a big part of like our value proposition as an agency is that there are 1,000 moving parts when it comes to creating content, and like a big benefit of working with us as an agency is that we do all of them, right? So we can sort of package all of that together into one single deliverable, but behind the scenes there's a ton of stuff that's happening, and so I feel like showing that kind of demonstrates the level of like rigor that goes into the content, and also gives us sort of a place to showcase some of that like intangible strategy, right? So, why did we make the content in this specific way, and how did we sort of empathize with the reader, and those types of questions that go into creating good content, but the only way that you really see that is like, is the content good or not, right? But you don't necessarily know like what levers led to good content, and I think that's sort of a strength of ours that we don't have a great way right now to kind of highlight, is that like, hey, like we actually gave a lot of like thought and care, and like this takes time, right? And it takes time because we want it to be good, and we want it to align with all of these specific goals, and different things that we're trying to achieve with the content. So yeah, I think having some kind of a like a content level case study, breaking down an individual piece, it seems is really exciting to me. Let's come back over here. Okay, so we talked about doing proactive questions to answers, answering questions with video, AMA as a content marketing agency owner, AMA for how to find, hire, collaborate with outside vendors on content. Yeah, so basically, we talked about all of these. First of all, I think this is all like, you know, LinkedIn is maybe one of, oops, wrong column here. LinkedIn is one place where this lives. The content would almost certainly be published first and foremost on our website, but the distribution channel, as it were, would likely be LinkedIn, or we would like publish it there. Let me add that here just as a so yeah, we didn't really talk about website as a channel, but I think it's worth mentioning here that you would probably create sort of the main piece of content for our website, and then we would kind of repackage and repurpose it to work on LinkedIn. Um, I mean, this really needs to be at least a quarterly thing. Honestly, we could probably do it more frequently, depending on. But yeah, we really should get into a better cadence there. So we've got proactive questions. So this is kind of like an ongoing thing. So while we're talking about cadence, I think this is like a weekly or maybe like a month, maybe a monthly, but it should really be ongoing where we do some kind of community questions. And so we have a couple. I think if we sort of frame it primarily as like a community Q&A kind of approach, then we've got a couple of different like iterations on that. So one is that we can do the AMA. We talked about how you might frame that in a couple different ways. Probably can't do an AMA every month or every week. So, but that could be part of it, right? So we could say, hey, we're going to do an AMA every quarter or something, or like once a year or whatever. And in fact, we could get even more specific, right? We talked about a couple different angles for how I might approach that AMA, or we might approach that AMA. So we could set, different cadences for different types of an AMA. Paste these values only. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah. So I mean, for instance, like this could be, we could do one of these AMAs each year. Let's say, just as an example. This I really do think is like something like this. We talked about doing an office hours segment. That could be another way to approach it. But I think just like getting in, like being active in communities, answering questions that people have. I mean, that should just be like a weekly thing, or almost even daily. And then we also talked about like sort of proactively sharing content with questions. So like, hey, well, in another community, people were talking about this. Here's how I, here's sort of the answer I gave them. So yeah, I think that could be a good, like, let's just call it like answering plus like cross posting questions, right? So the idea would be, hey, maybe we kind of go, once a week or whatever, we kind of go around, we answer questions that are occurring in the community, and then we do kind of like a roundup post once a week or something where we say, hey, here are some of the questions that we saw in different communities, and here was some of our thinking around it. I love that idea because it's just, I mean, it's such like it's sort of taking like a one-to-one thing where you're like interacting with somebody and helping them specifically with their question, and then sort of turning it into like more of a community resource, right? So it's like here's a kind of a roundup of questions that you might be thinking about, even if you didn't ask them. Yeah, I think that's a good approach there. One thing that I feel like is sort of missing from this, and again, this is why I want to kind of go through this again today, is because yeah, we talked about increasing our visits to our homepage as sort of a primary goal. Um, I guess I feel like we're sort of just like missing like a baseline social strategy, right? Like, are we just gonna like create content that's just like created to like work the algorithm and get eyeballs on us on our content without even sort of any further action? So just like viral LinkedIn content strategy, basically, is sort of what I'm getting at here. Um, hmm. I mean, I think that's got to be part of this. Again, it doesn't quite align perfectly with our strategy. Only, but also keeping in mind that as I've mentioned before, right, the way that we've mapped this out so far is sort of a simplified version, right? So we're sort of only stating one particular problem that we're trying to solve for each stage of the funnel. But in reality, there are, if you really we're sort of getting down into the nitty gritty, like there's a separate strategy for each function and for each channel, and you're solving a different problem for each function and each channel. And so we didn't get to that level intentionally because we didn't want to overcomplicate things too much and get into like six dimensions of strategy here. But if we were to do that, we might say, hey, on LinkedIn, there are a couple things at play here, but one of them is just like having a very regular ongoing cadence of content, right? So like part of the LinkedIn algorithm, to my knowledge, is like you're active and your content regularly gets a lot of engagement. That sort of puts you in a higher tier of like potential reach. And so without that, you're sort of limiting the reach of some of these other strategies that we've talked about. Um, so I think it would be good to have like sort of like LinkedIn. I mean, for lack of a better term, let's call it engagement bait, right? I mean, that's what it is. You're trying to game the algorithm, get people to click the read more link, and then hopefully like your post or comment or do something to try to help amplify the reach via the algorithm. And I think that kind of content fits into a few buckets that we could brainstorm on here really quick. One that we haven't done a good job of really is memes. I'd love to do better work doing memes. I mean, I think there's so much opportunity there to come up with memes that are funny, but also like kind of hit hard for content marketing folks. Um, and so I'd love to get into that a little deeper. I would say the other thing we are going to get into some of like the story driven content that we've identified down here a little further. Which reminds me, I should probably add sort of funnel stage here so that we have that. Yeah, I think the other thing, so we want people to like basically just like know and like us. So memes are a big one. Probably fits primarily into demand gen, I would say, by the way. Or I'm sorry, brand rather than demand gen, because again, we're really just sort of building our exposure. Most people are going to see, might see it on their LinkedIn feed, laugh at it. Maybe they see our logo or my name, and now they are generally aware of me, but they probably don't know much about me. So it really doesn't serve demand gen in that sense. Um, but it does help. Every bit helps from a brand perspective, I guess. Um, Memes. What's another like content format? I mean, obviously, things that work on LinkedIn tend to be like stories or carousels, that kind of stuff. But I think we want to get a little bit more specific than that. Actually, as we identified here, so I'm gonna open up my screen here. Oh yeah, I'm sharing my whole screen so you can see it. So let me um, what am I looking for here? I'm looking for I am looking for our channel research template. Okay, so this is where we conducted our channel research. Um, and one of the things that we found about LinkedIn, right, was that the format was almost irrelevant, right? Like any format can work from what we could see. What really tended to work was emotional resonance content based on a painful experience. We talked about thematic remixing, clarifying directions, preaching to the choir content, overwhelm, humans make content, humans read content, having an opinion. We didn't see anything that was like a super specific framework or like a data points or case studies or anything like that. At least not in the content that we analyzed as sort of an outlier in terms of performance. So I think really, if we segment that down into a couple different approaches, I think one is this clarifying direction, options, or focus, right? So basically telling people, if I were in your shoes, here's exactly what I would do, right? Or if I'm experiencing this problem, here's exactly the steps I would take. I think that's a I think that's a good one because it sort of lends itself, right? There's a million different scenarios that can apply to. If your SEO traffic is going down, here's what I would do. If you can't keep up with your content demands, here's what I would do. Right? There's a lot of different specific things where you can get into that. I think that's valuable and also sort of lends a level of authority there. And then the other thing I think is this like sort of emotional play where it's like it's not really even actionable. It's just like I hear you, I feel you, like I know the pain points that you're dealing with, and like it sucks, right? It's just sort of like, um, you know, emotional, yeah, it's like emotional support almost to say like, yeah, content marketing is really hard, and this is why. Uh, I think that's sort of its own theme or its own approach. I mean, this kind of stuff is basically like daily content. I mean, I tend to follow like a roughly daily schedule when I can keep up with it. But I think, yeah, that's like a big one. Um, yeah, this is all LinkedIn. Could potentially like cross post that into some communities maybe, or repurpose some of that content also. But for now, we'll just call it LinkedIn. Uh, this community Q&A, I'm gonna just flag this as community. I think this applies in both scenarios, right? I could, for instance, do like a Reddit Q&A or AMA as well as an AMA in Tofu or Superpath or whatever. So that's one. Let's talk about life cycle. So this was one of the things that I think was maybe a bit creative on our part, is that we came up with this idea to hey, the life cycle, which you generally associate with like nurturing or retention, kind of deeper in the funnel. There's sort of a life cycle element here that starts with affinity, which is basically the more clients like us, the more likely they are to stick around. And so how do we sort of create affinity content aimed specifically at like our life cycle or our existing clients? And the strategy that we came up with was basically just to like get our existing clients to voluntarily consume our marketing content, and measuring that by how many times our clients engage with our LinkedIn posts or leave comments or subscribe to our newsletter, that kind of thing. For right now, I think I'm just going to make this really simple. I think we decided, we could do something like a client newsletter. That's pretty common, of course. But I think what I ultimately came down to was like, I really just like the idea of like manually curating this. Um, and especially with new clients, but we could also do it with existing clients where basically we're just saying like, hey, we know that like, this is a topic that you care about right now, based on what you share with us, etc. Here's some content that we've made, some podcasts or whatever that we've done in the past that kind of touch on that, might be helpful for you, as we sort of start working together, whatever, so, something along those lines. Um, so it's kind of like a manually curated thing. If we were doing it for new clients, of course, it's ad hoc, right? Like what as we get new clients, that would apply. Uh, if we decide to do this for like existing clients, you know, probably like quarterly. We don't want to go too crazy there. Um, yeah, that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to necessarily do a client newsletters, because I know it can, you can be sort of too annoying as an agency if you're constantly sending stuff to your clients, even if it's valuable in some way. So always try to toe that line there. Um, okay, I think that gives us a good sense of like our affinity content. So you can see here, we've already got a lot of, there's a lot of content that we're talking about creating here. Obviously, we're not going to create all of this day one, and as you sort of, Kate, pace all this out, it will spread out into like a fairly reasonable calendar. A lot of stuff is like once a quarter, so you know, sort of once you interweave that with your daily memes or whatever, it's not going to be as crazy as it might seem as we're sort of listing it all out here. Um, let's get into the tofu stuff real quick. So the first thing that we talk about for demand gen, basically, I think this is sort of the pillar of our content strategy. Really one of our true like tent poles, which is that we talked about doing a podcast or YouTube, where we interview show with our ICP, discussing how they overcame specific common problems related to content marketing. I mean, I think that's like a no brainer. And the thing that we talked about here is like that's sort of a tofu mofu, and then it also kind of leads into uh, our further like down funnel strategies. So having this like interview show, I think is key. Um, yeah, I don't know if we want to do this like monthly or like maybe some kind of like a season. But yeah, I think having that would be good. Um, I guess that's technically here. This is the concept, and then we could get more specific on like the actual content ideas. So yeah, that's where we can, maybe let's go like one level deeper on this one, since this is kind of the heart of like what we're trying to do with our strategy. Let's flip back to our customer research, and maybe like develop some actual our persona research. Yeah, what might be some actual topics that we tackle in a podcast like this, right? So keeping in mind that the strategy here, maybe before we zoom out, before we zoom in, let's zoom back out. So if we look at sort of the overall strategy here, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, hey, we're going to create this podcast about these problems that basically say, hey, if you've got this problem, listen to this podcast. You'll learn from somebody who's been there and can help you kind of figure out how to solve it. We're trying to focus primarily on um, the uh, I guess like the high level problem and sort of outcome, right? So like we couldn't meet our content deadlines, and like here's how we fixed it, that kind of stuff, right? So it's like a common pain point. There's like a framework, and the framework is like, we focused on these three things. So it's not going to get super tactical. It's not going to be like, this is exactly how we set up our Asana board or like whatever. It's going to be high level, like, hey, we addressed our project management process, and we set a weekly cadence for having status calls or like whatever. So excuse me, high level. Then we take that content, we repurpose it for LinkedIn. So let me just scroll over here. So this is podcast, YouTube, which again we've I think made the decision there that we record this as basically a video. We repackage it as a podcast. LinkedIn. Basically, what we do is we repurpose the stories from the podcast as sort of like a narrative, right? So, this terrible thing was happening, and here's how they solved it, right? So we take kind of the meat of the story from the podcast, we turn it into a LinkedIn post. The next thing we do is that we take the newsletter, right? So the newsletter is also part of this. Is sort of a repurposing strategy here, where we take the roadmap that's laid out in the podcast, and then we sort of do like a deep dive in the newsletter. So we say, hey, look, if you found that roadmap interesting that so and so at Atlassian shared or whatever, then like read our newsletter and we'll sort of go one level deeper and give you some like tactical practical advice for like how to actually put that into action. Um, we also talked about creating like a template or a roadmap based on the podcast. So I'm gonna drop that in there. I think that was also an idea from Chris yesterday, by the way. Shout out to Chris. Um, yeah, that's an interesting one, right? So we could like sort of use that as like a gated piece. So that's where we're sort of getting into like Mofu, I would say, actually, where we're starting to like gate the content and sort of converting contacts. Um, yeah, so that's sort of our basic loop here, right? Is like we have this podcast, we do this interview, we get sort of the high level story of like how somebody solved a problem, and then we take that content and we again, we're repurposing that as one does into a couple different formats. One being the LinkedIn, so sort of moving back up the funnel to say, okay, like we're just trying to kind of build that emotional resonance on LinkedIn, and then moving down the funnel, hey, if you want to like go deeper with this and like really figure out how to solve this, then like sign up for our newsletter where you'll get those like tactical, like sort of long form guides that will help you actually like do the thing that's being described. Okay. So that's our loop, if you will. Let me just make sure I didn't forget anything here because we also have the Mofu section discussing. Yeah, so we talked about this. This is all the same thing. Yeah. Okay. So that's sort of the main thing. Uh, we do have sort of another follow on here, which is the thing that we talked about, like this sort of like a community cohort kind of thing, or like a follow. I guess I think what we landed on was like doing like a follow up Q&A with the guest where people can come to it, like sign up to join us for a Q&A and use that as sort of like an actual like contact, a way to convert those eyeballs into contacts. So I think we'll probably follow up with that, but I think we can wait until we get to that Mofu stage to focus on that. For now, yeah, let's zoom in on this idea here, because I think now is a good time for us to kind of come up with like maybe some specific content ideas. So if we're going to host this interview show, we've got our ICP discussing how they overcame X problem. We can get pretty granular here in terms of like what are those problems, like what are those episodes might actually look like. What might those episodes actually look like? Let me just check chat real quick. Okay, no one's commenting in there at the moment, but shout out. Feel free to give me your thoughts there in the chat if you have any, or as I'm brainstorming this. So I think this is where we get down here, right? So I mean, we can look at the role, but to kind of reiterate and reframe our thinking here, support function, the service org, but they're not always given input at a strategic level. Uh, you know, Finding, vetting, hiring, onboarding writers versus freelancers is a challenge. Um, that's a good one. So let me start there because I think that's we haven't even gotten to the goals and the challenges yet, but I mean, I think a no-brainer here, right, is deciding between freelancers and agencies, right? Like that's a common pain point that this ICP has. They're sort of figuring out like, how do I get all this content made? Can I work with freelancers? Do freelancers, will they get my brand? That kind of thing, or is it better to just work with an agency? Will the agency get my brand? That kind of stuff. Coordinating, planning, scheduling all the content. I mean, getting bandwidth and resources is such a universal thing, right? I mean, any person in any role basically has this pain point where they're just like, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough budget, I don't have enough whatever, people on my team. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say the opposite, right? I got too much budget, too many people on my team, that kind of thing. Maximize the impact of content. Okay, so I think this is the main one that I want to focus on first, just because this is such a broad and common, like, or I should say, not broad, such a ubiquitous theme that we heard throughout these interviews, which is that kind of coming back to the role that we just discussed. A lot of folks in these positions, they are leading what they might call like a service org, meaning that they are creating content based on requests from other teams. And the problem with that is that many of these folks then end up, basically feeling like order takers. They don't really feel like they have like a strategic voice. And because of that, kind of the content suffers, that kind of thing. So I think that might be um, a good theme here is like elevating content into a strategic role. Like, how do you get that seat at the table? How do you sort of get content involved earlier in the process to provide sort of that strategic guidance for these different teams before they say, hey, we need a blog post about X, right? This is a good one. Optimizing the content workflow, minimizing from scratch content. That was another one that I heard a lot, and I think is like increasingly important, right? Is that like it's one thing to create a workflow to like publish blog posts, but then as soon as you start thinking about, okay, well now we got to take that blog post and we've got to repurpose it for LinkedIn, and we've got to turn it into a carousel, and then we've got to do this and this and this. I think everybody understands the value of repurposing, but building repeatable and scalable workflows for creating content for all of those channels essentially becomes exponentially complex, right? And so I think that's again like a very common challenge and pain point that people will resonate with. So how do you do that? What does that look like in practice, etc. Maximize impact content by using it strategically. That kind of bleeds into that. I don't know if that's worth grabbing directly as its own theme, but maybe. I mean, it's sort of a different take on the same trends, same thing. I think this is a big one, right? So like translating content across functions. So what I mean by that is like cross-functional content, integrating content needs across different functions, right? So one of the other things that we heard a lot in our interviews was that, hey, I get a request from brand and they want a blog post about X, and then I get a request from PR and they want a blog post about X plus Y. But neither of these teams talk to each other. They don't realize that they're working on similar things or that their content is related. And because I'm so busy just creating the content, I don't even have time to like put together a plan for like, how do we do this more efficiently rather than creating two separate blog posts since they're similar in theme or topic. So figuring out how to kind of like collect and then integrate those requests or those needs from a content perspective and kind of see that from a top down view instead of a bottoms up view. I think that's a big one. Ooh, that's a good idea. Top down content versus bottoms up content. All right, now we're cooking. Let's go back to our right. So we talked about goals, defending budget, building a feedback loop, breaking down yeah. So this is kind of what I was talking about before. Breaking down silos, aligning appropriate level of quality versus efficiency based on specific content goals. I mean, all of these could be their own topic or theme. I think this is a big one right now. A lot of people are talking about budget, so I'm going to go ahead and drop that in there for now. And then, okay, so now we get to worry. So this is where I think we're going to really find some good, like deep ideas. So aligning content creation with internal goals and strategy, that is, obvious. Lack of context / expertise when outsourcing content creation, aligning cross-functional internal stakeholders, getting buy-in and budget based on the value of the content, measuring or quantifying and communicating the value. This is a good one, right? So I think this is one where a lot of folks, in these roles struggle. They are more in the world of content, right? There's all kinds of different types of folks, but one general theme for a lot of people is that, they're more creative minded. They're not MBAs per se. And so, the idea of sort of quantifying and then communicating to your CEO about how, how valuable your content is can sometimes be a challenge. Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit, but yeah, elevating this the content function beyond like the service org, or like, you know, not being order takers basically. This is another big one: missed opportunities, inefficiencies, wasted cycles. So I think this is something that keeps a lot of content marketers up at night. Is like, again, kind of the problem that we talked about before. Like, there's just not communication, and so because of that, there's like wild uh, inefficiencies where, hey, we created this blog post last month, but this brand didn't know, or this team didn't know that it exists. So now we got to create another thing that's, a slight variation on that. And instead of, having time to kind of plan that out and be strategic, we just have to do the work, because that's all the bandwidth we have. So that's another thing. Yeah. Is being like so focused on doing the work that you can't kind of lift your head up and look around at sort of the big picture. Yeah. Getting people going around the content team. Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so I'm going to just drop a couple more ideas here. So yeah, one is this idea of like content whiplash, so getting a bunch of different conflicting directions from a bunch of different stakeholders. Again, that's sort of the nature of content, is you kind of sit at the intersection of a bunch of different teams usually. And so because of that, this person says this is the priority, that person says this other thing's a priority. You can't, everything can't be priority number one. And so how do you kind of make those prioritization decisions? Content burnout is definitely a good one. Yeah, I mean, I could put all these in here. I wanted to capture that idea that I was just talking about. So there's like missed opportunities. So it's like, I mean, again, it's kind of like a variation on the theme that we already talked about, but like, so heads down on execution, no time for strategy, right? Again, it's kind of this idea of like, uh, where did it go? Elevating the content, into a strategic role, yes, but also like, how do you even start that process if, again, you're just so buried in like day to day work and like deadlines that you can't even think about that, right? Like, I think that's sort of a multi-phase problem there to solve. Okay, so now we've got some good stuff. We're really cooking here with this. Again, this is kind of our primary content loop, where we've got, hey, we're making this podcast, we're turning it into YouTube, then we're turning it into a newsletter, and then we're turning it into a LinkedIn post. Um, that's that's the beauty of this, right? Is that we've got this sort of primary loop. Even if we didn't do any of this other stuff, this would kind of function as sort of a content engine in and of itself. And then all of this stuff kind of serves to help drive that initial affinity and awareness, and then uh, etc. And then as we move through, of course, we've got more content that's built to, specifically to try to take the value that we're creating here, the audience that we're growing through this podcast, and convert more of them into potential customers, leads, MQLs, SQLs, etc. Okay, let's go back to Tofu really quick, because we also have an SEO strategy here that we talked about. This stuff is like super tactical. I think the high level thing here is this, right? Writing keyword optimized content for Tofu topics. It's sort of a never ending, evergreen piece, right? Again, this is kind of its own content loop, as it were. I think this is going to sit, I don't know why I'm adding 5 rows. It's really only 1 row. That's really sort of purely Tofu. So we could, this is where we could start to do maybe some keyword research or develop some topic ideas around like Tofu content topics. I think the key thing here is content marketing pain points, right? So I'm just going to drop that in for now. If we have time, maybe we'll do like a little keyword research or something later on, just to go through that process. But yeah, I think at a high level, basically, we're sort of addressing the sort of operational and like functional pain points related to content marketing teams. Um, while we're on the subject of SEO, let's go ahead and pull in the SEO down here as well for the MoFu, and we might as well just do BoFu also since we're doing that too. Yeah. So, oops. And then, again, we sort of broadly categorize that this is like content helping readers evaluate and decide between specific content marketing products or services. And then this MoFu is thinking about like potential solutions or paths forward. So, should I hire an agency? Is there, how do you hire a great freelancer? That kind of thing. Okay, we got some other stuff on the MoFu front that we want to plug in here. So if you look at demand gen, so again, we've already kind of covered the main thing here, which is the podcast and the newsletter. We talked about one other approach here, which is again converting those eyeballs into contacts. So beyond just the newsletter, we also talked about doing something with like a community kind of play. So one of the things that we talked about yesterday was not sort of following the standard playbook. The most common thing that you would do here, right, is like put an ebook in front of these people, try to get them to download the ebook. They sign up for your email list, whatever. We could certainly do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that approach. Obviously, it's worked for many businesses. My personal opinion, we're sort of moving out of that phase. I think gating content in that way has sort of diminishing return. Most content on the internet is free, and you don't have to sign up or give an email to get it. So, I think a lot of people, unless you've got something super duper unique or compelling, like, original data or like a survey or a study of some sort, I don't think many people are going to give you an email address for an ebook. And if they do, it's probably just because they want that ebook to kind of see what you're doing and kind of poke around rather than they're like an actual buyer. That's my personal opinion, at least in this space, content marketing. And then I would say, part of that thinking is that we're all marketers, we're all content people, we know the game. And so we're even more hesitant, I think, to give someone our email address as sort of a true lead, because we know what happens when you do that, right? So can we be a little bit more clever perhaps, but more importantly deliver more value in exchange for that email address. And so the idea that we came up with was to do this follow-up Q&A with a podcast guest. So basically, at this stage, we're saying, hey, if you're listening to this podcast or you're reading this newsletter or you're like this LinkedIn post, join the Q&A, sign up here, give us your email. Now you're in our email list. We know that you probably resonate with this pain point, right? So you have sort of raised your hand and said, yeah, hey, I'm struggling with deciding between freelancers and an agency too. I'd love to hear from somebody about how they made that decision. So that's kind of where we landed there. Sorry, I'm constantly fighting this formatting because I keep forgetting to paste without formatting. Okay, so we're gonna follow up there. MoFu, we already did our search stuff. We talked a little bit. By the way, we talked about LLMs yesterday and optimizing for the LLM. I think it's valuable. There's not really any like actionable things here. Well, there are not any specific pieces of content. It's really just tactical like execution. So creating content with attributed quotes about the value of working with an agency broadly, plus sort of the idea of this like hybrid collective agency. So essentially the main takeaway, if you weren't on the call yesterday or on the stream yesterday, is that we don't really know how to optimize for these LLMs at this stage. We know some general ideas about things that work, but the main crux of what we think we know about LLMs is that they tend to favor primary sources. They tend to favor statements that are backed up by quotes from primary sources. So, for instance, if you pull up an AI overview or you ask ChatGPT a question, the content that it sources the response from tends to be structured in a way that follows this pattern. So it would be something like, according to Tyler Hakes, the content marketing expert, content marketing agencies are great or whatever, right? And so it would be sort of a statement of fact or a statement about the quality or the value of something backed up by some kind of quote that's attributed to a specific professional. Now, how good Google is at determining if that's even a real quote or if it's a real professional, or how much of an expert that person is, don't know. But that's sort of the pattern that we've seen emerge so far. So that's what we're putting in here as our tactic. Again, there's not really a piece of content that we create for that, so it's not going to go into our content plan here. But as we're creating content, as we're writing these, Mofu blog posts or whatever, we want to sort of work in that tactic as a way to try to optimize for these LLMs. Let's talk about Bofu content. So yeah, here's, we also got some interesting ideas on this front. Let me check in here on chat. Okay, yeah. It's Friday, y'all. I feel you. I don't I didn't really expect a ton of people to be joining me live today on a Friday. I'm sure y'all got better things to do getting ready for the weekend. But it has been awesome working through this together and doing this live, and I hope it's been valuable for you if you are watching. Let's talk about demand gen. Okay, so yeah, again, this is sort of a tactical detail, but basically what we decided was that one of the ways that we might inject this idea of like a hybrid model or like a hybrid agency, which is part of our like demand gen strategy, is to, when we're creating this keyword optimized content for Bofu topics, uh, basically uh, adding in language and content about this idea of a hybrid agency. So trying to capture that traffic and then get them to our website and then say, hey, by the way, rather than hiring a traditional agency, you should consider a hybrid agency. Here's what a hybrid agency is. Hmm. Okay. So I think the sort of through line here that we figured out for this Bofu, first of all, again, just to give us like just to orient our thinking here, what we talked about here is that at the bottom of the funnel, what we're really trying to do is we're not trying to differentiate Optimist from other content marketing agencies. Ideally, what we'd like to do is we'd like to say, hey, Optimist is not an agency. Optimist is not a freelancer. Optimist is somewhere in the middle. It's this hybrid approach. It's a different way of doing content marketing. It's a different type of agency. And here's why it's better. And so the strategy here is not necessarily, again, about saying we're better than agency X. It's about saying hybrid agencies are better than traditional agencies. And so part of that is this idea that we need to then sort of select this like semi-branded category term. So again, it might be a hybrid agency, a collective agency, something like that, where we can say, this is the term that we sort of fit into. This is the category that we're creating. Just to be clear, we're not the only business ever to kind of operate under this model, but I think we've sort of taken it to its logical conclusion. And so we want to sort of associate closely with that specific category term. And so one way that we talked about that was like creating some kind of a guide landing page explainer to own a semi-branded category term. Okay, so this category term would be, again, something like hybrid agency. Okay, so that's that's part of our Bofu strategy there. We want to create that. That's gonna, that probably lives on our website, right? So first of all, there's sort of an SEO element there. Ideally, we want people to be searching for that. But there's also like, we want to have like a frame of reference where, we could potentially send people and be like, hey, here's what a hybrid agency is, and here's how it works, and here's why it's great, right? That also, by the way, bleeds into this next component here, which is lead gen, right? So now our goal with lead gen is that we actually want to get content leaders to sort of self-qualify as being a good fit for this, what I call the fourth path, or a hybrid agency, a collective agency, etc. So the idea being that we somehow get a content leader to say, oh yeah, I recognize these pain points of working with an agency. I recognize these pain points of working with freelancers, and I see why this other option, a hybrid agency, would be a better fit for me. That's what we're trying to achieve here. So the way that we talked about doing that, most the most basic thing that we could do is we could create some kind of a buyer's guide. How do you pick the right agency? Here's a guide, whatever. Uh, Sorry, I'm not trying to be dismissive of that idea. It's just, that's a very, very common and basic idea. I'm sure you get it. The other thing that we came up with yesterday was that we could create some kind of a quiz. Uh, so also, I think pretty straightforward, maybe a little bit more creative. But the idea being, are you going to sit down and fill out like this BuzzFeed style quiz about your content needs in order to figure out if you're, a fit for this approach, that kind of thing. I like that idea. I don't know how willing people will be to do it. So I wonder, I think we might be creating more friction than anything there by sort of making it too cutesy. Um, I haven't figured out how what else that looks like. How else can we do this, right? So just to frame this again for us further, so the whole idea behind the lead gen is basically, hey, we're going to use all these other channels to like send people to this thing, whatever it is, whether it's a quiz or a buyer's guide or whatever. We'll create SEO optimized content. We'll create a community, or we'll use our community and like our email channels. We'll use our newsletter. We'll use our podcast, and we'll basically say like, if you attended this Q&A, or if you signed up for our newsletter, or if you watch our podcast, like go take this quiz or whatever, right? So something there that says like, is this a fit for you? Go find out. Um, hmm, what else could that look like? I feel like there's got to be some other strategy for this. I mean, there's a million ways that we could try to do this, right? So one is that we could like create an actual community, right? So we could have, hybrid agency interested Slack community, right? Or whatever, where it's like, if you're interested in this and you want to learn more about it and see if it's a good fit for you, go join our community and talk to other people who work with us or whatever. That could be one approach. Could be a checklist, similar to a quiz, but maybe more low stakes, more I guess lower stakes, I should say, more low stakes. It could even be something as simple as like an explainer video or something, where it says like, watch this video about how hybrid agencies work to see if it's a fit for you, or something like that, to learn all about how hybrid agencies work. Hmm. Still feel like we haven't quite cracked this. Maybe we come back to that. Yeah, because all these other tactics are basically just like, hey, make this thing and then link to it everywhere else. So that's pretty straightforward. Next up, we talked about the life cycle. So sort of helping move those MQLs into an SQL stage, sort of like a nurturing strategy, right? And so I think the thinking here is that basically what we're trying to do here is basically get. Actually, I think I wrote this wrong. This is converting contacts to MQLs. So we want somebody to say like, hey, yeah, I'm on board with this idea. And then here is where we're trying to get those MQLs to convert into SQLs, where they're like, oh, hey, yeah, my boss is in on for this idea, right? And so, yeah, the main thing here is a toolkit of some sort, right? So the toolkit would be focused on, yeah, how do you kind of sell this internally? How do you sort of explain what a hybrid agency is and why it's better than other agencies? Those types of things, right? Toolkit for content leaders to sell agency to sell. And really, this could be a couple different things, or possibly even a couple different. Yeah, there are a couple different use cases here. So actually, let's break this out. So toolkit for content leaders to sell internally. So sell value of content, sell value of outsourcing content, and selling the value of a hybrid agency, right? So, depending on sort of the battle that's being waged internally, I think there's sort of a toolkit here that speaks to these different buyers as they kind of have these discussions internally. And then we already did the Boku content here, so we've got that. So this is the only thing that we've got left in the Boku section, is to figure out this this lead gen piece. Again, whether we want it to be like a quiz or a checklist or a buyer's guide, or something there that says like, here's how to know if this is the right fit for you. Let's come back to that, because again, I don't banging my head against the wall a little bit on that one, because I want to come up with like sort of I feel like it's just such an important lever in the entire strategy that I want to take my time kind of figuring out the right approach here. Retention, we had two main things here. One is brand. Again, you might find that kind of funny that we're thinking about brand at sort of the life cycle stage, or the post acquisition stage. But I think the point being here is that we're more likely to strengthen and improve our relationship with our existing clients if they feel really good about the fact that they work with us. And so one of the things that we talked about was doing some kind of like a client acknowledgement post or roundup. Pretty straightforward. I don't think there's anything mind blowing, but the idea being that there's sort of like a collective social proof that's happening, right? So hey, we work with all these A list companies and some of these like B list companies. Makes those those B list companies, or those lesser known companies, feel good to kind of be in the company of these larger businesses. So I think that's a valuable strategy. I mean, it doesn't need to be super complicated. Right. So we want to sort of like commingle lesser known brands plus better known brands. Right. So that could, it could be something like, hey, here's some of the awesome work we did this month. We did this for Apple, and we did this for Microsoft, and then we did this for Ferrari, and then we did this for Billy Bob's Fishing Hut, whatever. Yeah, I guess that would technically be the roundup, perhaps, rather than the post, but same general idea. Okay, and then we talked about this last one here, which is life cycle. So this is sort of helping our existing clients create enthusiasm and excitement about the work that we're doing together internally. So sort of selling the value of what we're doing. Excuse me. We want to highlight and emphasize the exceptional nature of our content versus our peers. We talked about a couple different strategies here. One, the most obvious thing that we can do there is just like put together a report. Hey, here's the metrics for the week. Everything's looking great. We, traffic is up 2,000%, whatever. That's sort of a basic part. It's kind of baked into everything that we do for the most part. Although, one of the challenges with that is that it's not always universal, right? So depending on what our role is within the content org and within the larger marketing org, there may or may not be sort of like clear-cut metrics or KPIs that we can measure here, right? So if our job is to, create ebooks to support sales enablement, we may not know anything about how that actually performs, right? So that can make that tricky. We talked about submitting our work for awards. Certainly something we could do, sort of external validation of the work that we're doing together. Also a little tricky because it requires us to get sign off and that kind of thing. Many of our clients are creating content that is not always sort of publicly accessible. So the idea of thinking, of submitting that for an award might might be a difficult sell. Uh, I really like this idea. So doing like a kind of a roundup internally, or not a roundup, a review internally of like what are our competitors making right now, and like how does our content sort of stack up to their content. And hopefully, if we're doing a good job, if we're doing our jobs well, there's a clear distinction where you say like, look, hey, we made this content. It's, an A plus. Look at their competitors. Their content sucks. This is how much better we are than them. So sort of, proactively comparing ourselves to competitors to hopefully highlight our uh, exceptional nature, as it were. I'm going to go ahead and just paste that in there. All right. So we have uh, a lot of content again to make. Obviously, not all of this is going to make the final cut. Not all of this is going to be happen at once, that kind of thing. So if you're looking at this thinking like this is insane, how are you going to make all that content? Yeah, that's sort of part of the challenge, right? That's sort of what we're helping solve for clients as well. um, the other yeah, so the next thing that we need to do, actually, before we move on, we should probably spend more time on this Bofu thing because we do need to crack that. And let me just make a spot in here so I don't forget about it, since it's potentially the most important thing. So yeah, we're somewhere in here, right? So we're talking about Bofu, and we need like a really cool idea for getting people how to self-qualify. Okay. With that said, let me take a quick breather here, and we'll come back to it. And we'll give that some more thought, and then kind of move through the rest of the process. But I think we're getting pretty close to kind of wrapping this process up. We've got a pretty good idea of what our content kind of looks like based on our cadences. We haven't filled in all these cadences, of course, but we could, we could definitely sit down and start to like map this out into like an actual calendar, which is great. And that would give us a pretty good sense of like what we're actually doing and building here. Yeah, so I'm excited. I think we've got all the parts basically here, and so now what we need to do is just keep moving it forward piece by piece. All right, I'll be right back. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be here in just a moment. All right, I am back. Thanks for hanging out while I took my break here. Got my caffeine and my big regimen of drinks over here. Okay, so let's brainstorm this out a little more. So we have basically one unanswered question I think for our strategy, which is how do we get these people to self qualify? Let me pull my screen share back up so that we can brainstorm on this together. Get the content planning tab. Okay, so basically we're looking at this, right? So what does it mean to have somebody self qualify? Sometimes it helps me to write my notebook, so I'm gonna pull that up. Okay, so self qualifying. You can think about it. One of the ways that I think about it, at least, is like sort of like a PLG approach, right? So when you think about product led growth, generally speaking, the goal is to like get people into the product, let them try it out, see how it kind of fits with their needs, and so by the time you're asking them for money, they've already kind of qualified themselves, right? They know, oh yeah, like this is helpful for me. Usually you do that with like a free trial, sometimes with like a free tier, and you kind of upsell them. Um, I think it revolves around operations. So you think about so first of all, let's think about this. What are the criteria for self qualifying? So first of all, in this case, right, we're trying to get people to self qualify for the idea or for the need that their need for not just an agency, right, but a hybrid agency and Optimist specifically, right? And so what we need them to what we need them to decide in order to self qualify, right, is like first of all they need content help, right? They need help with uh, I would say like sort of fulfillment or like the execution piece of it. Uh, that that they're you know I would say the other qualification thing here is that like their needs are fluid, meaning that hey, this week we need a bunch of blog posts. Next week we need a bunch of case studies or whatever, right? So they have sort of a fluid content strategy. Maybe there are some pieces of it that are consistent, but other pieces of it, are sort of dictated by these other teams and other stakeholders. And I think the other thing that we want how we want them to self qualify is that like they sort of understand the challenges of working with agencies, and they understand the challenges of working with freelancers. So it's a lot, right? So we're basically asking people to like check a lot of boxes here in order to sort of ideally come to this conclusion that like, oh hey, this is helpful for me. Um, but interestingly, I think there's sort of like a common theme that all of this stuff sort of hinges around, which is the operations component of all of this, right? So when we think about content marketing, right, there's sort of the planning and the strategy. There's like the creative side. The thing that like puts makes those two things connect is the operations part, right? So, that's everything from, the workflow and the process and assigning tasks in Asana and all that, but also like, where do we get how do we get the buy-in that we need for a specific piece, or how do we get input from a subject matter expert, or that kind of thing. So there's a lot of like just like moving parts behind the scenes that make content work. And you know if they need help with content and they need like sort of help, actually, so let me rephrase that. One of the main reasons why I think businesses are going to need help with content marketing is because they don't have sort of that operations component. They don't really have like the correct infrastructure within their team to support a likely expanding need for content, right? So they've got, hey, if the workflow is, we sit down, we pick a keyword, we write a blog post, really straightforward. But I think what's happening in most of these orgs is that their needs are getting more complex. They're getting more requests, and because of that, they're getting buried. They don't have time to kind of rethink like, how do we execute that? What does that workflow look like? How do we integrate these two things? And so, really, kind of the linchpin of like what is going to help them get out of that rut is like figure help with the operations part. That's my thinking. Right? So it's like if your content ops feels like chaos, that's a pretty good sign that A, you need content help. B, you need, it at least feels like, you need help with the fulfillment. You need somebody to take that off your plate so that you can do all this other stuff. C, your needs are likely fluid, right? That's probably part of the reason why your content ops feel like chaos, is because you've got 1,000 different requests from 1,000 different people, and you don't really know how to manage all of these uh, different types of content that need to be created effectively and efficiently. Now, if you need help with content ops, that doesn't necessarily indicate that you understand the challenges with agencies or with freelancers. But I think it sort of by nature tends to disqualify those options, right? Like most traditional agencies, right, are tend to be quite rigid, right? Like they have, it's very transactional. It's like dollars in, content out. They tend to not sort of get into the weeds with most agencies, not every agency, but like most agencies, they're very systematized. They have a process. They have it's a productized service for a lot of agencies. And so there isn't really the option to say like, okay, yeah, but how do we deal with all of these edge cases or these like unique scenarios where we need, different types of content, or we need to take this blog post and then repurpose it in 20 different ways. Uh, Most agencies aren't really equipped to handle that. Similarly, I think most freelancers, they're there to deliver a service, right? They're really not like going to integrate with your team at that level. So I've said this to our team before, and specifically Katie, one of the person who leads ops at Optimist, ops at Optimist, uh, is that I think like operations is sort of part of our superpower as a business, right? Like Katie has done a great job of sort of building out a really like robust set of systems and processes there. Uh, it's very detailed and precise, but also very flexible in the sense that like we can adjust it and sort of put different pieces together to make it work for different clients, while maintaining sort of a consistent schedule and timeline and workflow. Uh, anyway, all that to say, that feels to me like a linchpin. So I wonder if the qualification here, the way that we get people to self qualify, is really, instead of take this quiz and figure out if you're a hybrid agency person, maybe it's just an offer. Maybe it's just like a free like operate a free operations consultation, right? Like right now, our only real CTA for become a client at Optimist is like, tell us about your content needs, right? Basically, like, tell us you want to hire us, which is fine. I mean, I think that's still valuable. Maybe some clients still do fill that out. They reach out and say, hey, I need content help. Can I hire you? But one way that we might sort of capture more of those people who are feeling these pains is to open this up as like sort of a get a free workshop, consultation, something where we will help you kind of diagnose the problems with your content ops, or sort of tame your content chaos, if you will, right? So, the content is sort of the consultation in this scenario, right? So let's talk about, okay. So I like this idea. Like I said, I think it feels a little bit more creative and a little bit more value forward than a quiz or a ebook or something. Um, Content ops. Let's just call it a consultation for now. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm imagining that how does all this kind of stuff come together, right? So as we talked about, here's kind of our main content loop where we're sort of first of all we're sort of building our audience here. We're sort of bringing people into our funnel or our universe through this main content loop, which is primarily about the podcast, YouTube, and newsletter. Kind of getting these people in the door in some capacity. Then we're sort of more deeply qualifying people, or we're sort of converting as many of these people as we can into contacts by offering sort of a deeper look at whatever problem kind of brought them in the door. uh, and then we're sending those people to some kind of a guide or landing page or explainer that talks about the value of this hybrid agency or collective agency model, right? So it basically says like, hey, if you're experiencing these problems, I'm imagining that, okay, I have this Q&A with our guest, and then I'm going to at the end say, hey, if this resonated with you, go check out our guide on our website about hybrid agencies and how they help. Go to yesoptimist.com/hybrid or whatever. And then on that page, there's a bunch of content about what a hybrid agency is, how it works, why it's great, yada yada yada. Basically, it's kind of like likely a lot of the same content that we already have on our website, but kind of packaged up slightly differently, maybe more of a long form. Uh, and then the main call to action here is like schedule this consultation, right? Help learn how to tame your content chaos, basically, right? So it's like, talk to us and we'll help you figure this content ops stuff out. And then there's sort of some secondary like supporting resources, which is this toolkit. So hey, if you're already sold on this, then here's how to sell it to your boss, kind of thing. And that's the funnel, right? So once people get in here, we've got them we're getting them on the phone, or some kind of discussion. Not everybody's going to ultimately become a customer, I'm sure, but that gives us a way to sort of open up those conversations a little earlier than normal, where somebody would reach out specifically and say, hey, I'm ready to talk to you, and I want to hire you. At this stage, we're sort of helping them. Again, they've sort of self qualified for the general thesis of what we offer, and they've self-qualified as needing help with their content ops. And so again, we sort of qualified these leads pretty thoroughly by the time they fill out this form or request this consultation. Let me sit with that for a second. I think that's it. I think that is our strategy, y'all. This thing has come together. If I do say so myself, I think it's come together quite well. Um, and I'm really, yeah, I'm just really proud about the process that we went through together here, and I want to say once again thank you so much to everyone who joined, who followed along this week. I know watching somebody live stream a spreadsheet for 3 hours might not be the most compelling content in the world, But I definitely felt like people were engaged with the process and engaged with the thinking and the brainstorming. And I've gotten a lot of comments and messages from folks saying that they've really enjoyed watching this unfold. So again, I just hope it's valuable. If you did find this valuable, drop me a note on LinkedIn, ping me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you there. Connect with me, follow me, whatever you want to do on LinkedIn. Secondly, would love to have you subscribe here to our YouTube channel. I don't know. Next time we're going to do a week long building in public live stream, but we do have live stream content that happens. Generally at least once a month we have some kind of a workshop or a Q&A or something that we're hosting over here. So yeah, we'd love to have you subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay up to date on all of our future content. That would be awesome as well. And yeah, I mean, again, just one more final time, I'll say, thank you to everyone who signed up for these things, who commented, who requested the templates, all of that. It's been awesome hearing from everyone, and hopefully you found it valuable. If you do want to grab a copy of these templates, by the way, I'm going to be posting one more final wrap up post on LinkedIn following this live stream. You'll be able to get a copy of this buyer persona template, this channel research template, as well as the content strategy canvas. If you would like to get copies of those, again, pop over to my LinkedIn, Tyler Hakes, to search for me. I'm sure you can find me easily. And yeah, I'll be posting a message. All you got to do is drop a comment and I'll send you the link via DM. Yeah, I think that's it, y'all. I think let's go ahead and wrap it up there. This feels like a good place to close up shop. This has been a fun project. I've learned a lot, and feel like we came out at a good place. I feel really good about the strategy that we built together, and some of the specific content ideas and tactics that we developed. So I'm really excited now to kind of get into the actual content piece of it and start building stuff. So yeah, thank you all again. Thanks for hanging out. Good talking with so many of you and meeting so many new folks. If you do have questions or want to chat about anything that we streamed this week, feel free to drop me a note. Again, best place to find me probably is on LinkedIn, or you can pop into Tofu. By the way, one more final shout out for Tofu. If you're not already a member, we've got almost 4,000 members now. But yeah, content marketing, SEO. It's a group of freelancers and agency folks, solopreneurs, in-house marketers. A good mix. So if you want to talk shop, content marketing, SEO, join us there. Join tofu.co. 100% free. We'd love to have you. All right, everyone. That's it. We'll end there. Thank you again for making this an epic week, and see you soon. Cheers.